Hello everyone. I warmly welcome all of you viewers to this special webinar of Science City. The topic of today's webinar is Effect of Climate Change on the Environment, which is based on nature. We have Dr. Meghaben Bhatt as the speaker in this webinar. Meghaben Bhatt has done PhD on climate change and she is a very good science resource person. We are presenting this webinar to you in a joint venture of Sri Balwant Parekh Vignan Nagari and Gujarat Council on Science and Technology, Guj Coast, Gandhinagar. I am also welcoming Dr. Narottam Sahu sir, DST officers and team. As an employee of Science City, Vignan Nagari, if I say about Vignan Nagari, I will say only one sentence: come, explore and share. But if you can't come in person now, you can also enjoy Science City by visiting our website. We are constantly updating our website and you can also follow us on Facebook. New science awareness programs such as webinars, competitive exams like ISO, ICO, Olympiads, science mobile vans, mobile van library, various skill development programs, computer learning facilities and computer experience, a huge museum with working models, a brand new science park with big outdoor models of science, a Science Express magazine, a special program for every school student like a science trip. This is what makes our non-profit organization, the Science City, special. Hope you find out a lot from this webinar. Thank you. Over to you, Meghaben.
Namaskar. Today's program on effects of climate change on environment, and I, Dr. Megha Bhatt, welcome you all for this fantastic program being organized by Vignan Nagari, that is Sri Balwant Parekh Science City, Bhavnagar, and Gujarat Council on Science and Technology, Guj Coast, Gandhinagar. Thank you very much, DST, Guj Coast and Vignan Nagari, to have sponsored this program, and I'm sure children will be benefited looking at this program, at least to understand climate change and become climate warriors, which is being need of an hour. So let us start. Without wasting a single minute, let me start sharing my screen. So, as I said, today's program is on effects of climate change on environment. And I, Dr. Megha Bhatt, again, as I said, welcome you all for this program. Now, to understand climate change, my dear children, first of all, we must know what is weather and what is climate. So, when we talk about weather, it is the state of the atmosphere at a given time. That means when you talk that, okay, today's temperature is so and so, we got so much of rainfall today, or water vapor in the air, or humidity, or there is cloudiness in the environment. So basically you are talking about the weather. But when you talk about the climate, it is like, suppose I'm sitting at Ahmedabad on 22nd of December, say at 4 o'clock, the temperature outside is probably 19 degrees Celsius. So now, if this is 2020, so now if I have to go back, say 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, so in 1990, okay, if I go back to 1990, that in 1990, on 20th of December, in Ahmedabad, at 4 o'clock, what was the temperature? And like that, I noted down for 1991, 1992, 1993, and I go on till 2020, okay? And then start comparing the data, make an average of that particular data, and basically what I try showing is that particular data I try comparing, and then I try predicting the weather, okay? That, okay, this is called as the climate. So we can define climate as the average weather for a region over a long period of time using 30 years. So basically we say that climate is what we expect, children, okay, and weather is what we get. So if I give you a very simple example, that in Navratri you never expected rains, okay, but in Ahmedabad or in Rajkot or in Bhavnagar, probably now since last 5 years there is not a single Navratri where we are not getting rainfall, correct? So my dear children, that is something unusual, okay? So climate which is expected in this particular zone or area of India where, in the month of December it does not rain, but so that is called as a climate. But we are going to be seeing what is climate change. So that is what we are trying to expect, dear children. So weather can change several times in a day, and the climate normally takes a long time to change. So let's try understanding what is it, okay? So atmosphere around the earth, that is basically the atmosphere in terms of my 6th, 7th and 8th grade children exactly know what is atmosphere. When you say layers of atmosphere, we have studied troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, ionosphere and so on, correct? So that atmosphere around the surface of the earth basically acts like a greenhouse. Now what is that actual greenhouse effect? Let me show you with a very simple animation, okay? So let us see this particular animation and you will understand everything very well. So how does our earth warm? Basically we say that what is a greenhouse effect, or what is that greenhouse effect caused by the atmosphere over our earth's surface? So let us see the first step. As a stage 1, radiation from the sun in the form of light waves enters the atmosphere and warms the earth. So these are the radiations which you can see with the yellow color rays. And then second one, naturally infrared radiation is produced by the earth, and some of this heat travels through the atmosphere and escapes to the outer space. Now this is something very normal, children, okay? So this is a normal process. But now what happens that the atmosphere, what you are able to see, that some of this heat is absorbed back by whatever greenhouse gases which are present inside the atmosphere. Earlier also that greenhouse gases were already present, okay? So it used to get absorbed. But now what happens is that basically at the 4th stage, because now there are lots of greenhouse gases, basically all that ultraviolet radiation gets reabsorbed, okay? And now you can see that the atmosphere has turned reddish. That means that is the enhanced greenhouse effect what we are looking at. So my dear children, this is the 4th stage where we say that increased level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere trap more of the emitted heat, and this leads to greater increase in the Earth's temperature. So what is it? Let's try understanding it in the sense that there used to be, since years, there used to be a natural greenhouse effect which was already existing, that in the Earth's atmosphere, which you can see on the left hand side, naturally there were gases, greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, like nitrous oxide, methane and so on, okay? Now all those greenhouse gases were reabsorbing the emitted heat, okay? So that was happening already. But because of the human interventions, that our own activity as human beings, what has happened is that those increased level of carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxides, basically those are the greenhouse gases, right? So because of that, the heat which is getting absorbed is much more than before, which we call it to be enhanced greenhouse effect. And greenhouse effect used to be really good, dear children, but this enhanced greenhouse effect is causing the entire process which is called as climate change. Okay, so let us see a very small video on global warming.
For 2.5 million years, the Earth's climate has fluctuated, cycling from ice ages to warmer periods. But in the last century, the planet's temperature has risen unusually fast, about 1.2 to 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Scientists believe it's human activity that's driving the temperatures up, a process known as global warming. Ever since the Industrial Revolution began, Factories, power plants, and eventually cars have burned fossil fuels such as oil and coal, releasing huge amounts of carbon dioxide and other gases into the atmosphere. These greenhouse gases trap heat near the Earth through a naturally occurring process called the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect begins with the sun and the energy it radiates to the Earth. The Earth and the atmosphere absorb some of this energy, while the rest is radiated back into space. Naturally occurring gases in the atmosphere trap some of this energy and reflect it back, warming the Earth. Scientists now believe that the greenhouse effect is being intensified by the extra greenhouse gases that humans have released. Evidence for global warming includes a recent string of very warm years. Scientists report that 1998 was the warmest year in measured history, with 2005 coming in second. Meanwhile, readings taken from ice cores show that the greenhouse gases carbon dioxide and methane have hit their highest levels in the past 420,000 years. Arctic sea ice is also shrinking. According to NASA studies, the extent of Arctic sea ice has declined about 10% in the last 30 years. As long as industrialized nations consume energy and developing countries increase their fossil fuel consumption, the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere will continue to rise. Researchers predict that temperatures will increase about 2 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century. What's less certain is what rising temperatures mean for the planet. Some climate models predict subtle changes. Others forecast rising sea levels which could flood coastal areas around the world. Weather patterns could change, making hurricanes more frequent. Severe droughts could become more common in warm areas, and species unable to adapt to the changing conditions would face extinction. Although much remains to be learned about global warming, many organizations advocate cutting greenhouse gas emissions to reduce the impact of global warming. Consumers can help by saving energy around the house, switching to compact fluorescent light bulbs, and driving fewer miles in the car each week. These simple changes may help keep the Earth cooler in the future.
Alright, so now you understood what is global warming. Now let us look at the greenhouse gases. So for my school children, it is lovely to identify better that here they have given carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen, oxygen and water vapor. Now the best part is that if we try looking at each one of them, then let us start with the first one, okay, carbon dioxide. Now, is it a greenhouse gas? Yes, you can see that every time a carbon dioxide molecule hits the ultraviolet radiation, it traps the heat in the form of the red color which you are seeing, right? So, this is a greenhouse gas. Now, look at the second one, methane. Methane traps infrared radiation and this warms the atmosphere, and this gas is also a greenhouse gas. What about nitrogen, which is 78% in the atmosphere, and as you can see that suppose that nitrogen, that 78% is not a greenhouse gas because it is not trapping the heat, alright? Otherwise, if it would have been a greenhouse gas, we would not have existed being 78% present, correct? Now the oxygen, which is a lifeline to us, which makes up to around 21% of the atmosphere, but it does not trap infrared radiation. So oxygen is also not a greenhouse gas. Alright, and let us look at the last one, which is really surprising for everybody, that look at that water vapor, okay? And water vapor, which is evidently a greenhouse gas, traps infrared radiation and this warms the atmosphere. And this gas, naturally this water vapor is a greenhouse gas. Now, imagine, my dear children, that because of usage of air conditioners and other activities, we are day by day increasing the amount of water vapor also in the atmosphere, and that's the reason that our environment is warming up because of our daily human activity. Now, if we ask a question that is the climate always the same, has been always the same, okay, now if you look at that, then some of the beautiful museums in Europe, they show a time around 1300 to 1850, where the paintings show that even in the summer time, people are wearing such outfit which were really, really warm enough. Okay, which shows that there was something like which is called as a little ice age. And similarly, exactly vice versa was the medieval warm period, where in the colder regions, basically in the odd time, the medieval warm period was being experienced. And that means the climate was changing at that point of time also. But now, if I try showing you with the temperature change data for years to see, what you have to all concentrate is that the year in which I'm trying to show you, look at the temperature scale, okay, temperature difference scale. When there is an increase in temperature, the color will move from yellow to red, okay? And when there is a decrease in the temperature, the color will move from gray to dark gray, right? Gray to blue, you can say, okay? And it is wonderful to see this particular temperature data, my dear children, that will tell you that how anthropogenic or human activities are leading towards what you call it to be climate change. Okay, let's look at this. So 1880 to 1884, it looks something like that. Now 1886 to 1890 and 1886 to 1900, you can see that still the red color has not appeared. Okay, and you can see that in these times, basically you can see that everywhere it is appearing quite a low as a temperature difference. But then as you go on, 1906 to 1910, 1916 to 1920, and then 1926 to 1930. So my dear children, basically here everywhere, not only in the northern hemisphere but also in the southern hemisphere, the temperature started rising everywhere. Now, what was the reason for that? Let us look at the next one and we will understand that better. At 1936 to 1940, we can actually compare it with the kind of circumstances the world was facing at that point of time in terms of World War. Okay, so World War I and World War II basically appeared during that particular time, and it was also a time of industrialization. So later on, you will be able to see that because of the nuclear bombing, the atmosphere was actually warming up all the time, right? And then slowly and steadily it was picking up after 1950, that a lot of inventions were happening throughout the world in terms of transportation, in terms of electricity. So as you go on producing electricity, the gadgets which were being every day invented, which were running on electricity, naturally produced a lot of heat. Okay, so let's go on. 1956 to 1960, 1966 to 1970, 1976 to 1980. But up to now, 1986 to 1990, it was very evident that because of industrialization, everywhere the temperature was rising. Not a single area on the surface of the earth which did not show much on what you call it to be the temperature change, right, as a data. Then if you look at 1996, it started getting worse and worse. So 1996 to 2000, and finally it was an alarming signal to the whole world that yes, there is something what we call it to be climate change which is happening, and it has to be an alarming signal to all of us that now as a human species we have to stop. Okay, so let us try understanding this climate change and how we as a human being contribute to the whole idea that okay, we can be climate warriors and we can stop this as a process. Correct? So let us look at this, my children. So basically we say that if you try defining what is climate change, people say that the global temperature has increased around 0.6 degrees in last 140 years. The 10 hottest years are for the last 100 years that have occurred since 1990, and scientists have predicted that the climate could increase up to around 6 degrees in next 150 years. Imagine that in last 140 years, the change was only 0.6 degrees Celsius. That was the increase which was throughout the world, which was visible. But maybe in the next 150 years, the change could be around 6 degrees, which is tremendous. Okay, we may feel better that 6 degrees mein kya ho jayega, hai na? What will happen in just mere 6 degrees? But no, it's not like that. 6 degrees makes a lot of change, hell lot of a change. Let's see how. So basically the predictions for for 2100, the key projections are that mean global temperatures will increase by 1.4 to 5.8 degrees from place to place. Depending upon the place, it may increase. Sea levels may rise up to 1 meter, that is 0.09 meters, to 0.88 meters, that is approximately 1 meter. And people say that if it goes beyond 1 meter, then there are certain cities which are identified in the world that they will be underwater. Okay. Unfortunately, if India's one city also is in that list. Anyway, there will be more precipitation in the form of rain, snow, hail over the northern hemisphere. There will be more hot days and fewer cold days. Now, if with all these projections, how as a human being we should respond, correct? So what are the solutions, what we are looking at? Now, see, look at this, that first of all, we have to prove that it is because of our activities. And you can see that here the year has been plotted on the x-axis and the amount of carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxide has been plotted, that is parts per million, has been plotted on the y-axis. And everywhere you can see that after 1800 to around 2000, that means that is the era of industrialization we are talking about, correct? So there is a tremendous increase in the amount of all these greenhouse major gases after 1800, and especially from 1900 to 2000, you can actually see that increase tremendously happening. Anyway, then look at this one. So all three of them, consistent increases after 1800s, which you can see, which has a direct relationship between this data with temperature increase as an evidence of climate change. Now, who all are the top emitters? Top emitters of carbon dioxide, basically the major gas, greenhouse gas. As you can see, India, okay, comes at a third position. Now you will wonder that why does India come at, third position? See, imagine that apne villages hame bacha lete hain. Our villages actually save us because they are not using machineries which are not based on electricity. So more mechanized life you have, beta, then you are more emitter of carbon dioxide, and that leads to China and United States being the top emitters of the carbon dioxide gas. Then, looking at the causes and the effects of climate change, very quickly let us look at the video.
Human activities, from pollution to overpopulation, are driving up the Earth's temperature and fundamentally changing the world around us. The main cause is a phenomenon known as the greenhouse effect. Gases in the atmosphere, such as water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and chlorofluorocarbons, let the sun's light in, but keep some of the heat from escaping, like the glass walls of a greenhouse. The more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the more heat gets trapped, strengthening the greenhouse effect and increasing the Earth's temperature. Human activities, like the burning of fossil fuels, have increased the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere by more than a third since the Industrial Revolution. The rapid increase in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere has warmed the planet at an alarming rate. While Earth's climate has fluctuated in the past, atmospheric carbon dioxide hasn't reached today's levels in hundreds of thousands of years. Climate change has consequences for our oceans, our weather, our food sources, and our health. Ice sheets, such as Greenland and Antarctica, are melting. The extra water that was once held in glaciers causes sea levels to rise and spills out of the oceans, flooding coastal regions. Warmer temperatures also make weather more extreme. This means not only more intense major storms, floods, and heavy snowfall, but also longer and more frequent droughts. These changes in weather pose challenges. Growing crops becomes more difficult. The areas where plants and animals can live shift, and water supplies are diminished. In addition to creating new agricultural challenges, climate change can directly affect people's physical health. In urban areas, the warmer atmosphere creates an environment that traps and increases the amount of smog. This is because smog contains ozone particles, which increase rapidly at higher temperatures. Exposure to higher levels of smog can cause health problems such as asthma, heart disease, and lung cancer. While the rapid rate of climate change is caused by humans, humans are also the ones who can combat it. If we work to replace fossil fuels with renewable energy sources like solar and wind, which don't produce greenhouse gas emissions, we might still be able to prevent some of the worst effects of climate change.
Okay, let us look at some evidences, okay, that was the climate change actually there, now how can we prove that, okay, there is a climate change which is happening. So look at these pictures where I can show you the Mendenhall Glacier, which I have visited myself in 2014, okay? And I would try to show you, I am trying to show you a kind of photograph which was taken from the same setting at the same place by different photographers in 1894 and 2008. What is the difference you can see? You can evidently see that this is now a lake. There is no more glacier. Okay, so all the glaciers are actually melting. Same way, the Montana pictures, as you can see that here there is a lot of snow, whereas all that snow has already melted, right? And like that, there are n number of glaciers which you will try and comparing, even if 50 years difference will show you that most of the snow has melted. So glaciers are melting, that is one impact. Now, what are the other impacts what we are looking at? Now, suppose if you look at the nature, naturally there is a habitat destruction. So if you write down habitat destruction, polar bear or something like that, unfortunately in Google, it will definitely show you a piece of snow, which is, just over the sea where the polar bear is nicely sitting like that, but unfortunately, why the polar bear is sitting like that? Because we have already taken away his habitat from him, correct? So basically, all that snow where he was living has already melted and there is nowhere to go for him. And that's the reason which is called as habitat destruction. Now about the winds, the world is facing extreme weather everywhere. We ourselves are facing so many cyclones in India. Heat waves are very often everywhere. About the food part of it, changing in the farming patterns because of droughts. We already know that in Maharashtra, there was a span before 10 years where a lot of farmers actually committed suicide because of this reason. And about the pests, increased number of diseases are happening because of this temperature change. Unfortunately, we are passing through one such corona era right now, correct or not? And about the coral reefs are getting destroyed every day or bleached every day, what we call, okay, on the surface of the on the bottom of the ocean. Then coming to the next is habitat shift. Now if we look at this part, this is something very interesting, that what do you mean by habitat shift? So first of all, when you say biodiversity, bio meaning living, diversity is the variety. So variety of living organisms like plants, animal, microorganisms, everything put together living on the earth is called as biodiversity. Now, see, now look at the left side, that is showing the current climate, okay? Now, depending upon that, over the mountain, the temperature would be very different. Now, suppose, and the kind of forest also existing would be very different. Now, what happens is that if I try annotating here, then you will understand one thing very nicely, that suppose at the bottom, suppose if we are talking about say 30 degrees, okay? Now 30 degrees at the bottom, now the temperature, suppose if it rises to 34, then those animals which are surviving at 30 degrees naturally will have to go a little bit up at the altitude where it used to be 28 earlier and now it is 30. Okay, so what will happen to the animals or the biodiversity which is surviving in around 26 to 28 degrees Celsius? They will still little go up. Okay, so maybe where their requirement will get fulfilled. So now where it used to be 14 degrees, that 14 degrees might turn to around 18 there. And similarly, my dear children, all those animals who are looking for the higher altitudes to move. Now, what will happen to the animals which are moving from here? Okay, they will be extinct because unfortunately the lowest temperature, the minus temperature what they require, maybe -2 or whatever, which is required for them to survive, that particular temperature is not achieved. Maybe it has gone to positive, and that's how they are not able to survive. So where will they go? They might get extinct because of what we call it to be habitat destruction or habitat loss. Okay, and this is something very, very important to understand, and that's how we have lost on your right now, if you see, we have lost the kind of forest also, the types which earlier used to exist because of climate change. So this, we see, basically if you actually study, when you go for higher studies, children, at that point of time you may understand it better. Okay, but now when you are trying to understand climate change, probably this is the time when you try and relate, your own ideas, not only with different subjects like what is ecology and what is atmospheric chemistry and what are winds and what is nature and all that. At that point of time you will understand that much better. Okay, let us go ahead now. If stuff. Okay, so basically now let's look at the next one. Suppose if we look at the fertilizer consumption in India, basically this is my own data, my own doctorate data, and that's how I could show it to you that consumption of NPK fertilizers, that is inorganic fertilizers, is increased tremendously, like around 200 times more nitrogen fertilizers are being utilized. So as you can see, dear children, in all NPK fertilizers are getting utilized much more. Now what is the impact of that? So because of that, there is a process which is called as eutrophication which happens. Okay, so this nitrogen, wherever you are putting in the agricultural fields, naturally they will start moving towards the agricultural fields, and from there with the surface runoff it has to meet up with the sea or ocean somewhere. Now everywhere in the water bodies, what they will try is that in the soils as well as in the water bodies, it causes the surplus nutrient, that is surplus nitrogen, will start causing what you call it to be algal blooms. See, look at the lake which is on the left side where you can see the water which is visible, but on the right side you can see only the algal blooms. Now this process is called as eutrophication. Now because of that, what happens is that these are supposedly the aquatic weeds which are growing unchecked, okay? And these algal blooms can cause a lake to lose its own species. Now how? Let us check out that. Okay, so species diversity will be lost because of this extra weeds or algae which is growing up in that particular lake or water body. Now, if you look at the next slide, probably you will understand this better. Okay, now dead zones, see how people came to know that something like this is happening because of use of this inorganic fertilizers. Those nitrogen rich waters rather started moving from streams to ocean. Now, in the ocean, algae grow, reproduce very quickly, leading to what you call it to be eutrophication, what we saw it in the earlier slide. Now, that algae dies and decomposes, but it uses all the oxygen which is there on the surface of the water. And because of which what happens is that biodiversity underwater, jo bhi fishes vagera hai, they will start dying, forming what you call it to be dead zones. So now look at that suddenly, before few years, on the surface of one of the islands in Asia, one could see hundreds of dead fishes lying like that, and they called it to be dead zones. Okay, and that is also one of the features of climate change, that you just imagine that our own activity like using of nitrogen, what you call beta, they are all killing these biodiversities which are existing otherwise in their own habitats. Okay, now acid rain is also one of the features, as we all know that because of extra greenhouse gases which are present, and some of them get dissolved in rainwater, and that's how they get to the surface of earth, and we call it to be acid rain. And look at the scenario in 1860, and you can see that amount has definitely increased in 1993 because of the concentrated amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Okay, now what are the impacts what we are looking at? That what will happen because of this? Okay, we are experiencing more warmer days and more heat waves, higher death toll amongst the elderly and disabled, increasing risk of forest fires. These forest fires are so common. All of you must be aware that in the coast of California, basically the entire California was burning just before 2 months, correct? And for so many days together, it was burning because of forest fires. So if you can see, there is more intense rainfall, more floods, more landslides, more pollution of water. Uttaranchal has seen, since last 5 years, Uttaranchal has seen many landslides and 4 distinct floods which are being noted in India, right? And destroyed harvest is also one of the feature. And then across the world, as you can see, more droughts are seen. Too little drinking water is available. Food security is being threatened. Potential impact on conflict and migration, as you can see. Okay, so basically we say that these are the different impacts what are being seen across the world. The more intense tropical storms are being noticed. This is one of the pictures of the cyclone called Nilufar in Hyderabad, which came last year. Okay, higher wind speed all around with more rainfall, unusual rainfall. Sea level rise is the major problem across the world, where the entire cities are being threatened, which is populated city, correct? So basically, melting ice, as we saw earlier also, which reduction in water supplies and glacier lake outbursts, it leads to what you call it to be flash floods. Okay, and it destroys a lot of communities which are adjoining in that area. Now about the health and climate change, shift of diseases to new areas. See, earlier we never took any kind of flu shots, or in now in US and all. Earlier it used to be restricted to only Asia, but now it has shifted to the Western countries too, where they are undergoing what you call it to be flu shots and all. An increase of waterborne diseases. COVID is the best example, which is, we really thought that during the lower temperature time probably, or higher temperature time probably, the effect would be different, but now the expected effect is completely different, correct? And then you can say that, to summarize this, I can say that because of this emissions of carbon dioxide and all these other greenhouse gases, that is use of these fossil fuels, land use change, okay? That is how we are trying to use the land in terms of residential areas, agricultural farmhouses, golf clubs. That is called as a land use or land use change what we are implementing. And because of that, basically, we have led to increased levels of carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxide, which is all the gases are part of nutrient cycle. You saw what happens to nitrogen, correct? And that's how NO2 also is part of the nitrogen cycle, what is happening in the atmosphere all the time. So natural processes with physical condition, chemical reactions and biological activities, it disturbs all these nutrient cycles, what we learn it as carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle and all that, which leads to what you call it to be perturbed atmospheric condition, which we generally call it to be climate change. Okay, so why should we care? So children, please see that present day in 1990s and possible futures in 2090. Okay, look at the temperature. Okay, we will be you can see that there is a hell lot of a difference towards the reddish orange color where the temperature is continuously. And then to your knowledge, okay, to add to your knowledge, I should tell you that United Nations Development Program, UNDP, gave Sustainable Development Goals, out of which the 13th goal says that work for climate action. We as a community has to work for climate actions. We have to become what you call it to be climate warriors all around, because if we have this knowledge that what can we do this particular climate change, then only towards that, correct? So what are the solutions? So if we try concentrating on the solution part of it, the first one is to switch to renewable energies. We know what are the renewable energies which are freely available to us. So we are not using fossil fuels. Instead, we can just switch to solar energy, hydroelectric energy, wind energy, geothermal energy, ocean thermal energy, ocean wave energy, and tidal and currents energy. So the other energies, rather renewable energies, which are freely available to us, and they do not emit anything, right? They do not emit the greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and so on. And that is the added advantage of using them, correct? So we must, however, rapidly make the shift going away from fossil fuels based energy to renewable energy. Now, for Gujarat, we are really fortunate that we have a huge solar park at Charanka, Patan, near Patan, which is around 1.5 kilometers, where you will see hundreds of such solar photovoltaic panels, which captures the energy. But though, the temperature there definitely is more than the adjoining villages, but it provides the power, it provides the electricity which is running on the solar power. So that is something amazing. Okay. Then coming to sustainable transportation. So my dear children, there are things like hybrid model cars and all that, but that is not a sustainable solution for India, because India, we cannot afford a car where, people can hardly afford a car costing 4 lakh or 5 lakhs of rupees. How can one afford a hybrid car which is 40 lakhs, correct? So that's not a sustainable solution. Then what is the sustainable solution? Rather using of CNG vehicles, where the emission would be little different than what used to happen from kerosene, correct? Then we have to use mass public transportation, like how we use, the common buses. Okay, BRTS is one of the beautiful examples where, hundreds of people are traveling together, where they are not using their own vehicle and we are saving on petrol. So carpooling is something where, you are trying to understand that when you travel together, you are saving on 4 more cars. Okay, 4 children, if they are traveling together, 4 cars will save petrol for that day going to the school, correct? So carpooling is one of the very beautiful option. Anyway, now coming to the facts about the waste, you all know that cities are growing really fast. Waste has a lot of value, but it is being exploited as a waste, correct? Now we must shift. One thing I should be, I should be telling you that we know that there are sustainable traditional recycling methods now. Our Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation here in Ahmedabad, or else in other cities of Gujarat also, compulsorily we have to segregate 2 types of waste. But here you can see 3 types of bins. Rather, it has not yet come to our city, right? So we must try separating the waste rather we have to educate the community, implementation of infrastructures to treat the waste accordingly, and we must segregate them in terms of not only biodegradable and non-biodegradable, but much more beyond that, right? So technology will not solve our problem. We must also change our behaviors. That is something very important. Now this is, before, I close down today's program, I must tell you that earlier we used to know basically 3 R's, correct? Reduce, reuse, and recycle. But now we have to concentrate. World is concentrating on what we call to be 5 R's, which is refuse. You first refuse, then reduce, then recycle, reuse something, and recover something. Now, my dear children, this is not a new concept. Gandhiji implemented in his own book. Beta, he has written everything about it, right? Refuse, आपको जरूरत नहीं है तो लो ही मत. Refuse करो कि मुझे नहीं चाहिए. Reduce your needs also. That what you need for the only comfort purpose, you must reduce. And you must try to recycle. In India, it is something very popular. जैसे हम अपने जो cousins ने use किया है, including कपड़े, everything we try, games, we try using it, right? And that's the most wonderful thing we can do in our country as a developing country. And then reusing it and recovering it in the terms that whatever is going into waste as a byproduct, that also if you try to utilize, then it is called as recovery. Okay, then coming to the sustainable cities. So basically, when you talk about sustainable cities, it's like having a lot of nature parks, green buildings in terms of energy efficient buildings, in terms of that solar panel, मतलब roof पे आपको दिखेगा, terrace पे दिखेगा, बहुत सारे plants दिखेंगे सोसाइटी में, good water management, good waste management, जहाँ पे water storage के लिए ground water table increase करने का plant होगा. So all those buildings are supposedly what you call it to be green building. Okay, so we say that good water management, good waste management, green buildings, green roofs, green walls, not painted green. Okay, suppose let me show you that the next picture, right? So this is the picture where you can see that some offices in Bombay or Bangalore, you can see that the entire terrace is green. Okay, and the wall which is facing sun will have lots of plants. So this is called as green roofing. Okay, so basically, most importantly, biodiversity and natural ecosystems around cities should be preserved at all costs, all the time. Okay, and they have a very, very critical role to play. And nature conservation is something which should be taught to children at any point of time, which is like not cutting trees, planting trees all the time. Valuing nature in terms of ecotourism, agroforestry, medicines, we must learn to work with our environment and not against it. So, the destruction and loss of natural ecosystems will end up costing much more than their destruction for short-term profit, that we must understand. And that's how we have to value our nature. Now, reduce our consumption of fossil fuels. So, children, I already talked about carpooling, correct? But the best idea is to cycle. That when you instead of using a four-wheeler, you can switch to a two-wheeler, which will use less of fuel. If you are comfortable with cycling yourself, then probably it is a much better option than even a two-wheeler. So because greenhouse gas emissions are tied very closely to our energy consumptions, using less fossil fuel-based energy puts fewer greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and this will help slow down the global warming. So we must cycle. That is a very, very good option. And we can make a simple substitution in the sense that घर में बेटा पहले incandescent bulb होता था, okay, yellow bulb जिसको कहते हैं, okay, उसके बाद CFL आ गया, ये second वाला, and अब CFL से भी टाइम आ गया है कि हम कभी चेंज करेंगे, LED पे चेंज करेंगे, है ना? So you can feel that maybe LED must be costly at that point of time, but if you compare it, that it gives the same luminance, मतलब वो जितना प्रकाश देती है, that incandescent bulb जो 60 watt का bulb होगा, that 6 to 8 watt bulb will give that much amount of luminance. Same, okay? That is something very important, and that's how it will consume less of electricity, okay? And that's how your electricity bill will come down. And that's what you must make your parents understand, alright? So basically, how do you feel about climate change? When it was asked to people, now, 80% say urgent action is needed to combat climate change, and we should be part of that group, correct? We should be part of that group as aware citizen that yes, climate change is happening, and yes, we must be part of it. Okay, now protecting our planet starts with what? Okay, so as I already said about everything, this is just a glimpse of it in one slide, okay? That bike more, that is cycle, you educate your community, you yourself, your parents, your family, extended family, and the school and the communities, correct? You volunteer for good programs, always like becoming a climate warrior. You have to conserve water as a natural resource. You must reduce, reuse, recycle. But now 5 hours, so refuse and recover at the beginning and at the end. Use local goods. मम्मी को बोलो कि Mexican food की जगह definitely भेल बनाए, है ना? तो we don't need avocado, we don't need something which is not available in our market. वो कहाँ से travel करके वो सारे vegetables आते हैं जो हर जगह कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड एमिट करके आते हैं, है ना? Because वो कोई तो एयरप्लेन में चढ़ा के या कोई भी व्हीकल में चढ़ा के कहीं पहुंचा है, and that's how we can, save carbon footprints as you can see. And the brighter idea is to plant a tree, as you all must be knowing, right? So the whole point or the whole idea about this particular program, my dear children, is to reduce carbon footprints, that emission of carbon dioxide, all these greenhouse gases are leading to more and more carbon footprints. So we should act towards reducing this carbon footprints, and we should increase handprints. What do you mean by handprints? Center for Environmental Education actually introduced this beautiful concept where you are doing some action as a human being or as a citizen towards sustainability. So our motto should be to reduce carbon footprint and to increase handprints. So that's how I do that. So my dear children, reduce carbon footprint and increase handprints. And then what should our teachers impart to their students? To turn off the appliances. मतलब कहीं भी घर में जहाँ देखो तभी सब जगह लाइटें चालू होती है, या हमने फोन लगाया होगा, आपने देखा होगा कि अगर चार्ज के लिए रखते हैं तो हमेशा स्विच ऑन ही रहता है, फोन उठा के चलने लगते हैं. So please switch off everything whenever is not required. To encourage the parents and the relatives to change the light bulbs immediately to energy efficient ones, to recycle papers or reuse bottle plastics, to join or create eco club to make awareness and plant trees, to choose products that are environmentally friendly, to walk, cycle, or to take a train or to do carpooling, to try and use less always, right? To carry a cloth bag always, and to refuse for those plastic bags because they are actually making a part of the waste like anything, to participate in activities on climate change. Now, this is a very small poem which I had written before many years, probably 10 years, to teach, and it is, it says everything about nut and shell, in nut and shell about climate change. So my dear children, hole that is ozone on our home, beware of the storm. Be ready to get more, that क्योंकि होने के लिए तैयार रहिए. If attention to environment is not grown, no pollution is the solution. Don't be cruel, save fossil fuel and use biofuel. If earth is not clean, the scenario is not unforeseen. Think globally, act locally, live well and not in the hell. Reduce, reuse and recycle. Okay? So, beta, we say that please follow Kyoto. That is, there was a Kyoto Protocol which said that we have to reduce our emissions, we have to reduce our carbon footprints, and that's how I say that join the community of climate and be the change. So, thank you, Kuch Coast and Vignan Nagri. Especially, I would like to thank Dr. Ashwin Prajapati. And Ashwin Bhai, thank you very much for hosting me and giving me this opportunity today. I really thank Kuch Coast for sponsoring this program. And I myself, if I have to introduce myself, I hope children you enjoyed the whole program of climate change. I am a founder of an initiative called Sinotech, which is an experiential teaching program for school kids. Okay, it runs from grade 2 to grade 10, and we are based in satellite area. And if you want to ask anything, the best part is that we have Facebook and Instagram page, which we keep really very live. Every day we upload one beautiful scientific information which you can go through. Okay, so if you like the pages, then definitely you will get to know about our programs. So my dear children, if you want to write to us also, feel free to write to us again on www.sinotech.com. Okay, and we have the Gmail ID with the same name. So dear children, I really wish that all of you enjoyed today and understood climate change thoroughly in terms of how it happens, what are the effects or impacts of it, and how we as a human being can combat, or take action to reduce this climate change. Okay, thank you again. Thank you.